Hey, what's going on? It's time for another episode of Damien Ruins Horror Movies. My name is Damien. Tonight we are doing Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation from 1994. But first, click the link below to go to Cool Dude Inc. and check out some t-shirts. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to this video so you can always be updated on when new episodes come out. You can also go and like my Facebook page, which is down in the notes as well. If you click on that and like that, and it'll give you, it'll show when I also put new videos up. This movie, I don't know where you can watch it because I own it and I don't see anywhere where it's streaming. So if you haven't seen it, sorry, you're missing out. I remember when this movie came out because I was excited about it because I was like, cool, I'm actually going to be able to go see a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film in the theater. Because back in the day, like, you would open the newspaper and it would show what movies were playing. I think that's how we did it. Because I remember, because I cut out a picture of the movie, because it would have like a picture of the movie and then it would show what times and what theaters. I hope I'm remembering that correctly. You could also call and you would get like the automated machine and it would tell you what's playing at what times. Or you could just show up. But I never got to see it in the theater because it literally was in the theater for like a weekend and then it was gone. Not that I had money for it anyway, I don't think. But yeah, that ship sailed rather quickly. However, I did end up watching, was it 2002 when the remake came out? I did end up seeing that in the theater. So I saw one in the theater. This is directed by Kim Henkel. This is the one with Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey. This is kind of the before they were stars movie. And it's weird because Renee Zellweger looks a lot younger, even though this is like 2 years before Jerry Maguire. And this is like right after, I think this is right after Dazed and Confused. So it takes place May 22nd, 1992. And guess what, kids? It's prom night. In case you're wondering why I went from, because I've only done a video for the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and now I'm doing like the fourth one. It's because this is the prom theme. May. All right. Heather is not played by Renee Zellweger. I don't know who plays her. Heather is mad because she just caught her boyfriend Barry making out with some other chick. So she storms off. She gets in the car. Turns out it's his car. She gets in. I don't know why she has the keys. She gets in his car and starts driving off. And so he chases her. And somehow manages to get in, and they drive off, and it turns out Jenny and Sean are in the back seat. And Jenny is played by Renee Zellweger. And Barry is just kind of like, hey, come on, babe, it's not what you think. It's not, it's like, it's your fault I was making out with another girl. Because apparently Heather doesn't put out, so Barry's got to go somewhere else. So I was like, well, I don't know. Nobody in the car is buying the story, and the more Barry talks, the more you realize that he's a douchebag. He's the asshole character that nobody likes, but somehow has the girl because he's the alpha. And his dad's a doctor, so, he's rich. Girls like guys that have stuff. That confidence that comes from having a stable home life. And they're still driving. A car crashes into them. It's really weird because it crashes into them, and they just keep going like it didn't happen. Then they drive a little further, and another car crashes into him. And this time they stop, and the driver gets out, and he's like, are you guys okay? And then he collapses. And at first I thought it was Courtney Gaines. I was like, is that Courtney Gaines? But it's not. As far as I know, it's not, but it kind of looked like him. So they're like, well, fuck, now the car won't start. What are we going to do? It's like, well, I guess we'll walk. So they have Sean stay with the cars and that other driver, and the three of them, Barry, Heather, and Jenny, go walking to try and find some help because this is pre-cell phone. And they walk for a while. It's hard to tell how long they walk. And they find it's like an office. It's like a trailer home, but like an office. I don't know. It looks like a little trailer house, but it's an office. And there's a lady inside. Her name is Darla. And she's like, hey, what's the problem, guys? They're like, well, we just crashed and our car's stuck down there and we need help. And so she's like, okay, well, let me see what I can do. And she calls for help. And meanwhile, Sean is over by, where they left him, and a truck shows up. It's like a tow truck. And it says The Wrecker on the side. And the guy driving it gets out. It's Matthew McConaughey. a.k.a. Vilmer. And he's like, oh, what's going on? What's the problem? Your car won't start? You need a tow? And Sean's like, yeah. He goes, oh, and this guy. He looks down at the other driver. He's like, oh, this guy's dead. And Sean's like, no, he's not. He's like, yeah, he is. He's not dead. He's just unconscious. And so Vilmer goes down and snaps his neck. He's like, well, he's dead now. So Sean's like, oh, what the hell? So Sean takes off running. Vilmer gets back into his car, or his tow truck, and starts chasing him down. And eventually, runs him over and kills him. So the others leave the office. I don't really know what they established by going in there, because they went in there. She made a phone call. Then they left. She tells them to watch out for Wrecker. And then they're walking, and they complain the whole time. So you notice, because when they walked to the office, it was just a second. I mean, I'm glad it wasn't filmed in real time. But then when they're walking back to the cars, they're just bitching. They're like, gee, we've been walking forever. It's like, why does the walk back to the car seem so much longer than the walk from the car to the office? I mean, I know in real life when you're walking somewhere, it seems much faster than walking back. Because when you walk back, you know exactly how long it's going to be. But they're just bitch. And for teenagers, you guys are exhausted from walking. A mile. You probably walked maybe a mile and a half. Oh, it's not like you should be able to run it. You're 18, 17, whatever. A truck passes them. It's not Wrecker. But Heather and Barry go chasing after it, and Jenny does not follow. She just keeps walking. She's like, I'm going to go find Sean. They're like, all right, whatever. We're going to see if we can get help. They're just flagging down anybody they can see, which is not very many people. And Barry and Heather come across a house, and Wrecker's truck is parked out front. So they knock on the door, and there's no answer. And Barry's like, well, okay, I'm gonna run around back and see. Maybe they're out back. And so Heather sits on the porch swing while she waits for Barry to investigate and come back, see what he can find out. And this tall figure walks up behind her. It's very tall, probably a good 250 pounds. This house is old. So you got to imagine the porch is probably pretty old. Even if the porch is brand new, there's no way a guy this size is just going to come up behind you. That thing would creak so much. There's no way he can just he's just there. And he's sniffing her hair and shit. And then finally, because she's kind of she feels something but doesn't look back at all. You would think you would be hyper vigilant at that point where anything touched you'd be like, what the fuck? But she's just kind of, stop it. Then finally she looks and she sees him. She's like, oh, shit. So she runs into the house because it just so happens it's Leatherface. And he chases after. And it's quite the struggle of him trying to grab her. And she keeps escaping and he can't get a hold on her. And she keeps overpowering him. Even though she's just a small teenage girl and he's this huge guy with a lot of experience in killing people. And so, I mean, really, this kind of sums up if anybody ever asked that question again of who would win between Leatherface and fill in the blank. I don't care who the other person is. The answer is not Leatherface. Leatherface is not beating anybody. If he doesn't have his chainsaw, he's fucking helpless. And that's not to say that I don't like Leatherface, because I do. Chainsaw Massacre is my favorite movie, second favorite. Horror, that is. But he finally overpowers her and throws her into a fridge. Or it could be a freezer, the kind that you open up. I don't forget what they're called. I've been thinking about it since yesterday. What the fuck are those fridges called? And he traps her inside. Barry's out front with W.E., this redneck-looking guy who seems to be part of the Leatherface clan. And W.E. has a gun, or a rifle, a shotgun. He's pointing it at Barry, and he's trying to get Barry to go in the house. So Barry's like, all right. And Barry can hear her scream. So Barry goes in, and he shuts the door on the guy. So now the guy's trapped outside, and Barry's in the house, which is where you don't want to be. And he goes walking in, because he's like, okay, I know Heather's in here because I could hear her screaming. And he's actually, even though he's a self-absorbed asshole, he's actually going to go out of his way to try and save her. But first, he has to go to the bathroom and take a piss. So when he gets out of the bathroom, Leatherface greets him with a big meat tenderizer to the face. Boom! I think he hits him twice and drops him. Pretty sure Barry's dead at that point. And then Heather just kind of opens up the freezer or whatever she's laying in. Wasn't it locked or something? How was she trapped in there to begin with? She just climbs out, and Leatherface grabs her, picks her up, and puts her on a meat hook. And now the first two deaths, this is exactly the same as the first two deaths in the original movie. Elsewhere, Jenny runs into Wrecker and he picks her up. And it's just an awkward drive. Weird, awkward conversation. Until finally he points to the back. And that's where Sean and the other driver are. And she's like, oh my God, who are you? What is wrong? And she jumps out of the car. Or he pushed her out of the, I don't know. I think he pushes her out of the car. And then he's like, because he wants to chase her and then kill her. He wants to play with his food, if you will. And she runs into Leatherface, and Leatherface has a chainsaw out and going. Leatherface starts chasing her. Leatherface chases her to the house. She runs in. He chases her up the stairs. She jumps out the window, but instead of like falling, 2 floors down, she's on the roof. And then Leatherface tries to go out on the roof too, and Leatherface is trying to kill her on the roof. She doesn't know what to do, but then she slips and she falls off the roof and lands on the ground. Luckily, though, she's fine. She lands just perfect that she can get up and keep on running. And Leatherface is slow, but he runs down to try and go after her. Jenny takes off, hauls ass, and ends up back at the office where Darla is. And she's like, help me. There's a guy with a chainsaw. There's this house. They're after me. I don't know what to do. I need help. Is there cops? Is there anything? How to, get me out of this place? Which makes me wonder, how far away from the school, how far away from the prom are they? That Leatherface's house is, right there. This close, but now suddenly they're not near anything. And in all the other Texas Chainsaw Massacres, the house is not near anything. That's part of the problem with the house, is that you're kind of stuck there because you're not near anything. But now suddenly it's near a high school in a town. I don't know. And other than Chainsaw 3D, this is definitely the least intimidating Leatherface. Now, the Chainsaw 3D Leatherface was a bitch-ass Leatherface, but this one's pretty bad too. Turns out Darla's in on it, and she captures Jenny and puts her in the trunk of her car to take back to the house. This is like a reboot before there are reboots, because this is a carbon copy of the original, just with a prom mixed in. This is that's why I think it's funny. It's ironic that the remake that came out in 2002 is the least like the original out of all the sequels. All the sequels mirror the original to an extent. There's a dinner scene in every one. There's it's so much the first one done over and over again, and then when they finally do the remake, it's totally different than the original. Why weren't the sequels this different? So Darla has to go back to the house, but first she has to stop and get pizzas. Even though they're cannibals, apparently now they eat pizzas, which is kind of weird. And they're in there, and there's a cop there. The cop, fun fact that I know from looking at IMDb, the cop whose face you don't actually see is Deborah, is Stone Cold's wife. Stone Cold Steve Austin's wife is in this movie, but you don't see her face. I saw it in the thing. So after stopping for the pizza, she gets pizza. She takes Jenny back to the house. And W.E. starts talking about how Vilmer, Matthew McConaughey, he's been shot plenty of times. He's been run over. So apparently Vilmer, Matthew McConaughey, is supposed to be the original hitchhiker, the hitcher from the original movie. But this even has a date of 1996. This movie takes place 2 years after it was made. And 22 or 23 years after the original came out. And they're calling it The Next Generation, even though it's the same characters. And 23 years later, the hitcher looks 10 times better and younger than he did in the original movie. This movie, I don't know. I'm not sure why they made it. So no Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie would be complete without a dinner scene. So when Renee Zellweger wakes up, she is tied to a chair, or sitting in a chair at the dinner table, and Vilmer and Darla and W.E. and even a grandpa's there. And Leatherface has put makeup on and is dressed in drag. Leatherface. More like Heatherface. Except Heather's at the table too. She's not actually dead. She had a hook in her back but that doesn't necessarily kill you. It just makes it harder to breathe later when you have a hole in your lung. So Jenny escapes, basically just leaves Heather for dead. She escapes. She flags down an old couple in an RV. They don't want to stop, but they do, and they let her in, and Vilmer and Heatherface are coming after them, and they crash in the RV and knock it over. But then the weirdest thing happens. Like a biplane with the propeller on the front comes out of nowhere and swoops down, and the propeller it like dive bombs Vilmer and chops him up, and then it flies away. It's just like, what the hell was that? And Heatherface is still alive, but then a limo pulls up, and I kind of dozed off at this part. I gotta be honest. So, because this guy was in it a little bit earlier, but I'm not sure who the fuck he is, and I didn't feel like rewatching it. But he picks her up, and he takes her to the hospital. He talks the whole time, but he doesn't really explain who he is. And he takes her to the hospital, and then at the hospital, we see the original being like wheeled on a stretcher. We see the original Sally, the only one who's aged in this movie, going by, and I don't know who she's supposed to be. It's just like a little cameo, and you see the person pushing her. You just see from the back. That's fucking Franklin. It doesn't show his face though, just like Debbie. But that's Franklin. And I only know that because I looked at IMDb and it says guy pushing. But so yeah, we got original Franklin, original Sally. Franklin can walk. I always imagine that guy can't really walk in real life. And that's basically how the movie ends. And the only question left on my mind was, what the fuck did I just watch? Granted, the first 30 minutes is not bad, and you're kind of like, cool, this is gonna be good. But then it just gets worse and worse and worse, to the point where you're just like, why did they make this fucking movie? This movie had nothing. It brought nothing to the table. The Badass Award goes to Jenny, I guess, for escaping and surviving. Not to mention, she did kill W.C. His name was W.C., not W.E. However, she also made about every mistake you can make in a horror movie. What did we learn? Besides, the sequels are often unnecessary and cheapen the original classic. Survival tales. Don't cheat on your girlfriend. If you find a gun, make sure it's loaded before you rely on it for safety. When you find a vehicle to escape in, lock the doors, roll up the windows, turn on the headlights, and get familiar with your surroundings. All right, and that wraps up Texas Chainsaw Massacre Generations. Maybe it's good that you can't stream it. You just saved yourself 90 minutes of your life if you haven't already watched it. I will see you guys next time, which will be soon. Take care of yourselves and each other.